All right, well, good morning, and welcome to Revelation chapter 8, Revelation class. So we are live streaming right now, so for anybody that is watching online, we're glad that you've joined us as well. We're going to continue our study. We're going to continue with Revelation 8. So open your Bibles and turn with me to Revelation chapter 8, and we will keep going. Again, every time that I print these notes, I'm not sure why it does this, because it's not this way on my computer, but it drives me crazy. The first paragraph is always unbolded, and the rest of them is bolded, and I have no idea why that happens when I print it. But it does. I didn't do that on purpose. And if you are watching online and you would like a copy of these notes for any chapter that we have gone over so far, or any chapter in the future, if you would just comment on the stream with your email address, I'll be happy to send those to you. Would love to send them to you. Everybody that's with us has a notebook, or most people do, and the notebook is where they keep track of the notes, and we basically have a full study that we're going through together. So listen, the best way to do this while we are streaming, and this is for the people in the room, Olivia's waving at me, the best way to do this is if you have something that is burning in your mind that you want to talk about in the midst of the lesson, then absolutely we can talk about it. But I had two comments last week from people when we get involved in discussion. They can't hear the questions that are being asked when it's on the stream. And so it's just a bunch of dead time. And so what I was thinking might be best is if I teach through it, and if there's something that you want to talk about, that maybe you make an asterisk of it, and then I'll stop the stream. And then we can have discussion about I'll leave like 15 minutes for us to do that at the end. That way, for the people that are watching online, there's not a ton of dead time. Does that make sense? Yes. I mean, obviously, if there's something that we need to talk about, or you have a question right now, sure, of course. But other than that, maybe we can do it that way. That way we can have discussion when it's not on the live stream.
Oh, you repeat the question later.
I do, but I had a couple of people say that it was some dead time, they couldn't hear it. So anyway, all right, so let's get started. So Revelation 8. So listen, at the end of Revelation chapter 7, and by the way, I gave you these notes last week. If you weren't here and you need them, no problem, I'll give them to you. And this is what I was just saying to Emily. At the end of the Revelation chapter 7 notes, there was a description that I put on there of several of the different viewpoints regarding the millennial reign, which is the 1,000-year reign of Christ that would take place at the end of the tribulation period, after the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation. I'm going to pause on that, and we're going to move to Revelation chapter 8, and we'll come back to those viewpoints on the millennial reign at a later time. So if you remember, Revelation chapter 7 was specifically talking about the 144,000 witnesses that were called by God or sealed by God to go to the ends of the earth to evangelize the world during the time of the tribulation, right? So there were 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of who? Of Jacob, with one exception. The tribe of Dan is missing because Dan, there was some apostasy against God. The Bible doesn't tell us specifically what it was, but other than the fact that he had some apostasy. And then it was replaced by one of Joseph's sons, the name of which being Manasseh. So Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and the 144,000, there's 12,000 from the tribe of Manasseh. Now, when we pick up in Revelation chapter 8, this is kind of some juicy stuff, right? This is where we start looking at a description of some of these judgments that are being poured out on the earth, we know during the end times, during the period of the tribulation. So look at this. It says, the world at war is top of the notes. It is likely that the devastation that John sees as he observes the events of Revelation 8 is actually a result of worldwide nuclear war. I said likely for a reason. The Bible doesn't specifically say this, but what we read and what we see, it would indicate to us that what we're really picturing, what John is picturing and trying to describe here, would be some sort of worldwide nuclear war. Why would I say that? Why would I say that if the Bible doesn't explicitly say it? Well, I want you to understand this. John is writing these things with a first century vocabulary. I've said this before, but you need to understand. Imagine trying to describe things that we have in our modern world today with a first century vocabulary. How would you describe an airplane? How would you describe a missile? How would you describe some sort of nuclear John is describing things based on what he knows and what he sees, but he may not have the vocabulary that would make sense to us. But as we read through this, it would make sense that what we're really looking at is some sort of nuclear war, some sort of worldwide war that is a result of some of these judgments being poured out on the earth. Is it something I said, Katie? Oh, okay. All right, so anyway, look, we don't know this for sure. However, the description does line up. Remember, John is tasked with describing the indescribable. He is describing in the first century vocabulary that which there are no words to describe. All right, let's start reading verse 1, okay? Here we go. So, when the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now, who's the Lamb?
Jesus.
The Lamb is Jesus, right? And so the Bible says there was silence in heaven for half an hour. Now, I made this bad joke at the beginning, but I'm going to make it again. So I had a friend of mine, a pastor, that said that is evidence that men get to heaven before their wives do. There was silence for half an hour, right? It's a joke. I'm just kidding. My wife even left because of that. So anyway, I'm totally kidding. There are some households that may flip that around in the exact opposite, right? But anyway, the Bible says there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer. And he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. The angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Okay, so look at this, and I want you to understand. So this right here, this chapter depicts events that are taking place both in the throne room of God and later on, subsequently, as we continue reading, on earth. John is in the throne room of God. He's seeing what is taking place here as these judgments are being poured out on the earth. So, John is there seeing how this takes place there, and then we're about to read what the result of those things is. Now, a couple of things that are interesting here. I made the joke, there's silence in heaven for half an hour. Later on in the notes, you'll see this, but there's something interesting. This follows a specific Jewish practice in the temple when a sacrifice is made on the altar, at the altar of incense. There's a time of silence for a specific period of reverence, typically for about half an hour, as a sacrifice is being made. Now, I think that's interesting. I don't know if that's a direct correlation to what's taking place in Revelation chapter 8, but it is a Jewish practice that takes place in the temple when a sacrifice is being made. There's a time of silence and reverence specifically for a period of time similar to this, and we see this happening in the throne room of God when this seventh seal is opened. Now, the Lamb, Jesus, is the only one that can open it. The seven angels stand, and they're the ones that take this incense, and they offer it up with the prayers of the saints in the golden altar. Remember back in Revelation chapter 5, when we talked about that the prayers of the saints, that they're poured out at the feet of the throne of God every time that the seraphim say what they say. So we take the bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints, that are being poured out. Well, it looks like here in Revelation 8 that this angel, these seven angels, are actually adding to these bowls of incense. They're adding incense to the bowls, which are the prayers of the saints, which are then being poured out. It's interesting, and so we see when the angel took this censer and filled it with fire from the altar, he threw it on the earth, which would indicate that we have this silence, and now as a result of this silence, now we have this fire being thrown to the earth, which would seem to indicate that judgments are being poured out and what's about to take place. And then we see, as a result of this fire being thrown, this censer being hurled towards the earth, the judgments that ensue as a result of that. That's what we're about to read. Now, at the beginning here, the trumpet judgments in the notes, it says, in the trumpet judgments, the entire planet will be affected by massive loss of life, human suffering, and devastation. How do we know that? We're about to read it. The world government and world economy will become destabilized because of the mass chaos that's present. That is not something that's written specifically in the Bible. That just simply makes sense. If there's worldwide war, there's worldwide chaos, there's worldwide devastation, the world government and the world economy will be destabilized because of this chaos, right? And you understand, why are we talking about a world government? Well, let's talk about this. What's going to happen? What's going to happen during the end times? Is there going to be a world government that's established? Well, this world government's going to be led by one person. Who is it? The Antichrist. And actually, who's the religious arm of the Antichrist? We know him as a false prophet, right? We haven't gotten there yet to talk about these things. But this world government's going to be led by the Antichrist, politically, religiously, quote unquote. It's going to be led by the false prophet. And we're going to have this dynamic duo of deception that's taking place during this time. And as this happens, but as this continues to happen, there's going to be a destabilization, which would make sense, right? The interesting thing is, when the Antichrist rises to power, he's going to rise to power under the guise of what? One word, starts with a P, rhymes with fleece. Peace, right? He's going to rise to power under the guise of peace. He said, hey, if I'm going to be the one that's going to be able to bring about peace in the midst of chaos, the world that we're living in today, the chaos in the world today, hey, I'm going to bring about peace. Now, let me ask you a question. In the world that we are living in today, you hear a lot of talk about peace and safety.
Yeah.
What happens, what does the Bible say happens when peace and safety is declared? Sudden destruction will follow. So whenever we hear these things that take place, these words that are mentioned, these things that are said in the world around us, it should pique our interest to what is actually happening eschatologically, right? So look, I'm going to tell you, peace and safety, wow, that sounds like a great thing, doesn't it? We don't want communities that are ravaged by war. We don't want nations that are ravaged by war. Peace and safety is what I want in my own neighborhood. It's what I want in my own home. It's what I want in Fayetteville, Georgia. But I want you to know the Bible gives us a very, very specific answer as to what is going to happen when peace and safety is declared. The Bible says sudden destruction will follow. Now, the Antichrist, when he does rise to power, is going to declare peace and safety, peace and safety, peace and safety. And what we're about to see is, as even though peace and safety may be declared, sudden destruction will follow. Why? Because the judgments of God poured out upon an unbelieving world. You understand that? So, but back to what's going on in the world around us today, I want you to understand, when we look at, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, and then we're going to keep reading here, but this is just important for you to understand. When we look at eschatology, we look at the end times events, the things that are going to take place that happen after this, as the Bible describes. Where should our focus be? Our focus should be all on the nation of Israel, right? Because what is, by the way, what is the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation? What is it named? What is it called? The time of what? Jacob's trouble. What? Jacob, his name was changed to? Represents the nation of Israel as a whole, which is God's chosen people, right? So why does all of these eschatological circumstances, why do they focus specifically on the nation of Israel? Number one, they're God's chosen people. Number two, it's God's opportunity for the nation of Israel to be redeemed, even during the 7-year tribulation. You understand that? It is not only an indication of God's wrath, but the 7-year tribulation is actually a beautiful indication of God's grace. Why? It's a beautiful indication of God's grace because God gives yet another chance for Israel to be redeemed. Now let me ask you a question. Ultimately, is Israel going to be redeemed? Of course they are. Absolutely. But we also know there's going to be many, many people, many, many Jews that have died before now and that die even now that have missed the Messiah. Right? So anyway, I had to give you that little sidebar because I think it's important. Whenever we look at the world events, whenever we look at what's going on with regards to eschatology, very important that we keep our eyes focused on the nation of Israel. Okay, so let's talk about these judgments, the 7 trumpets. Now, there are 3 sets of judgments mentioned that are going to take place. There's the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, and the bowl judgments. Now, what happens as we continue through these judgments? Do they get progressively easier or progressively worse? They get progressively worse, absolutely. So I want you to remember this. The 7th seal represents the opening, or it represents the pouring out of the what? The trumpets, right? So the 7th seal is the 7th trumpets. There isn't a seventh seal and then the trumpets come after that. The seventh seal represents the seven trumpets, and that's what we're starting to see here. Look, starting in verse 6. Now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned, and all of the grass was burned up. Now let me ask you a question. What would we lose significantly if we lost all the grass, a third of the trees? What do you lose? Well, you lose oxygen, right? You lose the ability to breathe effectively. Look, I want to get to a little bit more detail on these trumpets, but I got to go through these notes first. So look at this. When I said when the final seal was broken, half an hour of silence took place in heaven. This is what I just described. That little bullet point below that, you're welcome to read that. It gives a little bit more detail about what I said takes place in Jewish culture and Jewish tradition. An angel in heaven offers the prayers of the saints, fills the bowl of the prayers. This initiates the incredible judgments that will follow. The seven trumpets do not follow the seventh seal. They are the seventh seal. The trumpets may be associated, maybe, and I said may in italics because we don't know, with chemical or nuclear warfare. Now look at the first trumpet. That's what I really wanted to get to. Hail and fire. 1/3 of the trees and all the grass on the planet are burned up. What would this lead to? Food shortages, limited air supply would be present. Think about this. If all the grass is burned up, don't you think all the crops might be burned up too? If all the crops are burned up, then what happens? We don't have any food. So when you have a third of the trees burned up, and you have all of the grass, it's going to lead to food shortages. And the air supply would be limited because of the lack of oxygen. This is a big deal. Let's keep reading. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Now you can turn your notes over. What in the world could that represent? Again, we're trying to describe with a first century vocabulary, we're trying to describe what is likely a representation of some sort of worldwide war or nuclear war. So this what looks like a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea, what could that be? Could that be some sort of a bomb? Could it be a meteor? Yeah. Absolutely. That would probably be more likely, wouldn't you think?
Mountain parts.
Right, exactly. Some sort of rock formation of some sort. So I agree completely with John on that. We don't know exactly what it could be. Could be some sort of a missile. That wouldn't make sense with regards to what looks like a mountain. A bomb, I don't think would look like a mountain, but a meteor would. And now, let me ask you a question. Have you heard anything in the news lately about there's meteors that are humongous coming close to the orbit of the Earth, right? Interesting. Have you, in years past, once in a while you would hear about that, right? You're hearing about this regularly. Can you imagine what kind of destruction would be brought if a meteor actually entered the Earth's orbit and slammed into the Earth? It would be destructive. Now, for me, as I read this, because it says that there's a significant amount of destruction that comes, it pollutes a third of the oceans and destroys a third of the ships, it would indicate to me that this is a massive, massive rock of some sort, right? Fireball type rock. So a third of the oceans, that's a humongous surface area that would be covered by this destruction. Now, what's the pollution? It could be a meteor. It could have something to do with nuclear warfare. It could be a combination of both. There could be nuclear warfare and a meteor that would take place at the same time. But it says this fireball into the sea pollutes a third of the oceans. So what does that mean? It means 1/3 of all the salt water is polluted and unable to be drank or to be used or whatever it may be. And then destroys 1/3 of the ships. Now, this reference to ships could, I say could imply military targets. One of two things. Could represent some sort of military action where 1/3 of the naval vessels of some sort are destroyed. Could represent that. Or it could be even simpler than that. When a meteor hits 1/3 of the oceans, it could destroy 1/3 of any ship that's out there, right? Could be cruise ships, could be your boat, could be my boat, could be a military, could be all a combination of all the same, right? We don't know. But we do know that a third of of the ships. Now, what's going to happen when a third of the ships are destroyed? The supply chain is going to be significantly impacted. Because if you don't realize this, and I'm sure you do, a humongous amount of the world's supply comes through what? Comes through shipping ports, right? So if you take out 1/3, the Bible doesn't say that it's just 1/3, like I said, of the military ships. It doesn't say it's just 1/3 of the civilian vessels. It says 1/3 of the ships. That's going to include military. That's going to include civilian. That's going to be cargo ships, shipping containers, whatever you may imagine. Not only are we already having a limited air supply, are we having food shortages because the farmers have nothing to grow food because the grass has been destroyed in 1/3 of the trees. Now we have the ability for these ships to get to where they need to go. 1/3 of them is gone. That's a big deal. Now, sounds like judgment to me, doesn't it to you? Let's keep reading. The second trumpet, I read that. Verse 10, the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So the second trumpet brings about pollution to 1/3 of what? The salt water supplies. This third trumpet brings about significant pollution to what? Fresh water. Now, where do we get the majority of our drinking water? Do we get it from the ocean? No, the desalination process is significant. And so we get the majority of our drinking water not from the ocean water where they have to go through the desalination process, which is to take the salt out of the water, but we get that primarily from the freshwater supplies. Duh, right? Within there, the water is refined and it's purified is what I was trying to say, and all of those things. But look at this trumpet. We have pollution of the fresh waters. The rivers and the streams are polluted by a falling star called wormwood, which most likely, I said most likely, refers to a bitter pollution of radioactive fallout, maybe following a nuclear explosion. That would make sense to me with regards to the bitterness. Yeah, go ahead.
The Russian word for wormwood is Chernobyl.
Okay. Interesting.
Famous for a nuclear meltdown.
Absolutely.
That area is still kind of barren and radioactive.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
So think about that. Now, again, this is just my speculation and what seems to make the most sense. But what is our job? Our job is to read what the book of Revelation says, try to make it make sense to what we see around us. This bitterness, and actually that's pretty interesting, I didn't know that. This bitterness seems to represent to me some sort of nuclear fallout, some sort of radioactivity that's present in the water, because that's where I think the bitterness would come from. But here's the thing that's even more crazy. Let me ask you a question. If you are dying of thirst, and thank God none of us have ever been dying of thirst, we say we are, but we're really not, right? I mean, I can say I'm dying of thirst and I go drink my waters right here. Even though the water's been polluted, don't you think you might try to drink it? Because you'd rather drink it and take your chances than die of thirst. Well, you can't drink the ocean water, and 1/3 of it's been polluted. And now, this fresh water has been polluted. And what happens as a result of that? Well, we lose the ability to have drinking water. But the Bible says that many people died from the water because it's been made bitter. So you know what I see? I see people who are thirsty that are drinking it anyway. I see people who maybe are taking a shower and they get burned to death by whatever is present in the water. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I see being what this might look like. That's pretty horrific, isn't it? Are the judgments of God poured out on the earth? Are they, let me ask it this way. These judgments that are poured out on the earth, are they God taking it too far? No. You have to understand, the unbelieving world deserves God's wrath. It deserves the wrath of God. The fact that He gives us grace in the midst of judgment is a beautiful representation of His love. Understand that. The world deserves judgment, but the fact that we get grace shows love. So, let's read this last bit, okay, the fourth trumpet. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so the third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, "Woe, woe, woe, to those who dwell on the earth, and the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow." We'll talk about that in just a minute. So what is this fourth trumpet? By the way, there's 7 trumpets total. We're only talking about 4 of them. The 7th trumpet is the enacting of the 7 bowls. We'll get to that later. This 4th trumpet is air pollution of some sort, possibly a result of nuclear fallout again. Sun, moon, and the stars are darkened for a third of the day. How many hours is a third of the day? 8, right? So what is significant about this? I think that there's some sort of nuclear fallout, some sort of nuclear war, some sort of a nuclear bomb that gets dropped. And don't you think that it would cause the world to seem as though it went dark because of the mushroom cloud or whatever it may be, right? And again, it would seem to make sense to me that that would remain for about 8 hours. That seems to make sense to me. So couldn't it be some sort of continued nuclear warfare that makes it look as though the sun, the moon, the stars have been darkened? Doesn't it seem like that's possible? It says a third of the day, a third of the night. I don't know, but that's what it seems to make sense to
It
me.
could also be geographical from the, that perspective, if in that direction.
Absolutely.
Massive clouds of whatever, until the sun got past that, it would be darkened. We
Yeah.
would see stars.
Yeah, that would make sense. So, and again, we're just looking from one man's perspective, right? So there is no necessary indication that John is able to see the entirety of the world at one time,
Yeah.
right?
And we really should apply that to all of these.
Right.
It could just be the sea, could be the Mediterranean.
Could be.
It may not be all the oceans.
It could be. However, we don't know.
We don't know.
And so that's why what I've tried to say, and I will continue to try to say, is this is what it could be. This is what it seems like it might be. But we don't know for sure because we have first century vocabulary and we don't understand John's full perspective. Right? Now, with that being said, we have the 4th trumpet. And as the 4th trumpet is blown, we have these things that happen. But the most interesting part of this to me is the last couple of verses that I just read. And then, Josh, in just a second, I'll be ready to stop the stream, okay? So the chapter ending, look at this. An eagle, and by the way, there are some English translations that actually say angel. So there's some translations say eagle, some translations say angel, yeah.
I just looked it up. ESV and King James, the Greek words used are different, so they're based on different texts.
Okay.
And that's a topic for another day.
Right. So we don't know if it's eagle or angel, right? But the English translations do indicate both of those. An eagle, some translations say angel, is seen flying around the earth with a message of doom. Can you imagine that? Imagine what that would sound like. Imagine what that would look like. The doomsday call. How many of you have heard of the United States of America having a doomsday plane, right? It does. The United States has a doomsday plane. They say, if you ever see the doomsday plane up in the air, it's doomsday. That's bad. Imagine this angel or this eagle or whatever it may be that's flying around the earth with a doomsday message, and the message is woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth. If you would have stopped before those who dwell on the earth and it just would have been whoa, 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 it sounded like my wife telling me how to drive, right? No, I'm just kidding. But woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth. What is the triple woe? I believe it refers to the 3 trumpets that are still yet to be sounded, right? Because we've had 4, there's 3 left. The 7th is the 7 bowls, but it's still a trumpet. This whoa, whoa, whoa is like whoa, whoa, and whoa. It's going to be bad. The judgments, these next judgments affect the whole world, is what it might seem like, because this eagle and this angel are flying around the world with this message. Does that mean that these judgments are getting progressively larger? Instead of just representing what John can show as his perspective, a third of this, a third of that, couldn't it represent now, maybe, since the message goes to the whole world, that these judgments are upon the whole world? I think so. No mention of the church. So what does that tell us? Again, I put this in here because this is what I believe. I don't know the answer to this. But that's why I put it in parentheses. Why is the church not mentioned? We don't have to talk about that right this minute, but the church is not mentioned. Does that mean that the church has already been raptured? Does that mean that there's another reason why the church isn't mentioned? I don't know the answer to that, but the church in this chapter, when these judgments are poured out, is not mentioned. You can take your own theology and apply it to why that may be the case. I told you what I believe, but it's not mentioned. The judgments, though, these next three, affect what seems to be the whole world. Now, what is the world? Woe. What is woe? It is a message of doom and a message of beware. And we're not going to see that until we get to the next chapter. So, that is Revelation chapter